You pray and hear nothing. You reach for God and find empty air. The silence feels like abandonment. Our culture has plenty to offer when life goes quiet. Therapy teaches us to process feelings. Mindfulness shows us how to sit with discomfort. Self-help promises we can think our way through anything. These aren't wrong, but they miss something essential. They assume the silence is a problem to solve rather than a mystery to enter. They treat spiritual dryness as a bug in the system instead of a feature. They cannot explain why the people who loved God most deeply often felt his absence most acutely. They have no framework for understanding why the saints often described their greatest spiritual growth happening in seasons of complete desolation. Modern psychology can diagnose depression. Ancient wisdom recognizes that some darkness serves purposes deeper than pathology. The wisest voices in Christian history understood something we've forgotten about the nature of divine love. Even Jesus knew this darkness. In Matthew chapter 27, verse 46, as he hung dying, he cried out with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And much earlier, the psalmist had already named this experience. Psalm 13, verses 1 through 2. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? The silence we fear has ancient company. In 16th century Spain, a man named John of the Cross understood this mystery better than almost anyone before or since. Born Juan de Yepes, he grew up in poverty after his father died when John was just 7 years old. His mother struggled to feed 3 sons, sometimes sending them to beg for scraps. John worked as a nurse in a hospital for the incurably ill, washing bodies and emptying chamber pots before joining the Carmelite order at 21. When he tried to reform the order's comfortable corruption, his own religious brothers turned on him. They kidnapped him in the middle of the night and imprisoned him in Toledo. 9 months in a tiny cell, 6 feet by 10 feet. No light except what crept through a crack in the wall. They beat him regularly, dragged him to the refectory to eat his meager rations on his knees while the other friars mocked him. They gave him bread and water and sardines so rotten he could barely keep them down. In that darkness, John discovered something that 2,000 years of Christian reflection had been pointing toward. The silence wasn't God leaving, it was God loving too deeply for feeling to contain. He called it La Noche Oscura del Alma, the dark night of the soul, and he wrote about it with surgical precision. The soul finds no satisfaction or consolation in the things of God, but neither does it find it in any created thing. Since God places the soul in this dark night in order to dry up and purge its sensual desire, he allows it not to find attraction or sweetness in anything whatever. This wasn't punishment. This was promotion. John saw that God withdraws the sweetness of prayer not because he cares less, but because he's preparing the soul for something deeper than emotional satisfaction. God perceives the imperfections within us, and because of his love for us, urges and obliges us to grow up. His love is not content to leave us in our weakness, and for this reason, he takes us into a dark night. The oldest Christian writers had always sensed this pattern. The Desert Fathers spoke of seasons of desolation that preceded breakthrough. Augustine wrote of God's hidden work in apparent absence. But John mapped the territory with unprecedented clarity. He distinguished between 2 kinds of darkness: the dark night of the senses, where prayer feels dry but the will still reaches toward God, and the dark night of the spirit, where even the desire to pray seems to disappear. Both are necessary. Both are mercy disguised as abandonment. The dark night is inflowing of God into the soul, which purges it from its ignorances and imperfections, habitual, natural, and spiritual. John saw divine darkness as divine surgery, God cutting away what keeps us from deeper union with Him. The pain serves love's ultimate purpose. I want to be careful here about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that every depression is a dark night. I'm not saying you shouldn't seek help for mental illness or spiritual direction for persistent dryness. And I'm certainly not saying that abuse or trauma are gifts from God. What I am saying is this: sometimes the silence is not absence, but presence too deep for feeling. Sometimes God loves us enough to wean us off spiritual consolation and teach us to love Him in the dark. The saints who walked furthest into the mystery of God often walked through the longest nights. This doesn't make the darkness pleasant. It makes it meaningful. There's a difference between being abandoned and being prepared for something your current spiritual capacity cannot yet contain. John himself never romanticized the pain. He called it night for a reason. It hurts. It confuses. It feels like death. But he also saw it as the most reliable sign that God is doing something real rather than simply making us feel better. The dark night strips away spiritual pride. It teaches us that we cannot manipulate God through technique or emotion. It reveals whether we love God for who He is or for what He gives us. This is why it often comes to people who have been faithful for years. Beginners need encouragement. Veterans need purification. The oldest Christian wisdom suggests that divine love sometimes looks like divine absence, not because God has moved, but because our capacity to receive Him is being enlarged beyond what comfort can contain. The silence teaches us to love without reward. The silence you fear might be the invitation you need. God's apparent absence often signals His deepest work. Love is learning to trust the darkness.